My name is Frederick Reynolds, 67 years old, and I spent 40 years building my construction company from nothing into something I was proud of. The 4-bedroom house I built with my own hands became my sanctuary after my wife passed. When my son Thomas, the successful doctor, and his lawyer wife Amanda suggested moving in to take care of me, I felt something was wrong. Their eyes were focused on my property, not my well-being. Before I tell you how my own flesh and blood tried to steal my life's work, leave a comment telling me where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button. You won't believe what happens next. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, the son of a factory worker who barely made enough to keep food on the table for our family of 5. From the age of 12, I was working odd jobs, saving every penny I could. My father always told me, "Frederick, in this world, you build your own success brick by brick." Those words stuck with me. After high school, while my friends went to college, I apprenticed with a local builder. I learned every aspect of construction, from pouring foundations to electrical work. By 25, I had saved enough to buy my first fixer-upper. I renovated it myself on weekends and evenings, sold it for double what I paid, and Reynolds Construction was born. The early years were tough. I took every job I could get, sometimes working 16-hour days. But slowly, my reputation for quality and honesty spread. By my mid-30s, I had 15 employees and was building custom homes for clients across 3 counties. It was during a meeting with a potential client that I met Jennifer. She was a real estate agent representing the buyer, and she challenged every aspect of my proposal. I was frustrated but impressed by her thoroughness. After the meeting, I asked her to dinner, expecting rejection. To my surprise, she accepted. Jennifer was everything I wasn't. College-educated, cultured, from a well-off family. But we connected on a deeper level. She understood my drive, and I admired her intelligence. 6 months later, I proposed, and to the shock of her parents, she said yes. We married in a simple ceremony. Her parents didn't attend, disapproving of her choice to marry a blue-collar worker. But Jennifer never cared about social status. "I see the man you are," she told me on our wedding night, "and the man you're going to become." With Jennifer by my side, my business grew faster. She had a keen eye for design and helped me elevate the quality of my homes. Within 5 years of our marriage, Reynolds Construction was building luxury homes, and we were finally financially comfortable. When Jennifer told me she was pregnant, it was the happiest day of my life. Thomas was born on a snowy December morning, and the moment I held him, I made a silent promise that he would never know the hardship I had experienced growing up. As Thomas grew, I made sure he had everything I hadn't. The best schools, summer camps, music lessons, sports equipment. Jennifer sometimes worried we were spoiling him, but I insisted. I want him to have the foundation I never had, I'd argue. Thomas was a bright child, curious and thoughtful like his mother. By high school, it was clear he had academic talents that exceeded both of ours. When he announced he wanted to become a doctor, I couldn't have been prouder. Medical school wasn't cheap, but I had been saving for his education since the day he was born. Those years were the best of my life. My business was thriving, my marriage was strong, and my son was becoming an accomplished young man. Jennifer and I began dreaming of our forever home, the place we would eventually retire. We found 5 acres of land overlooking a lake, and I designed every inch of that house myself. 4 bedrooms, each with its own bathroom, a gourmet kitchen for Jennifer who loved to cook, a library filled with books, a workshop for me, and a large deck where we could watch the sunset. I built much of it with my own hands, bringing in my best workers for specialized tasks. It took 18 months to complete, and when we finally moved in, Jennifer cried with joy. "This is everything I ever dreamed of," she said. For 15 wonderful years, that house was our haven. We hosted Thanksgiving dinners for my employees, summer barbecues for the neighborhood, and quiet evenings just enjoying each other's company. Thomas would visit during breaks from medical school, bringing stories of his classes and clinical rotations. It was during Thomas's residency that he met Amanda. She was a law student doing an internship at the hospital's legal department. Thomas brought her home for Christmas, and I noticed immediately how different she was from the girls he had dated before. Amanda was polished, ambitious, with an intensity that seemed to fill the room. Jennifer whispered to me that night that Amanda seemed more interested in our house than in our family stories. But Thomas was clearly smitten. He hung on her every word, agreed with every opinion she offered. I saw less of my son's personality when she was around, but I kept my concerns to myself. He's a grown man, Jennifer reminded me. We have to trust his choices. When Thomas announced their engagement a year later, I threw them an elaborate party at our home. As a wedding gift, I gave them $100,000 toward a down payment on their first home. Amanda seemed more excited about the check than the celebration itself. Still, I tried to welcome her into our family with open arms. Thomas was happy, and that was what mattered. The wedding was lavish, more Amanda's style than my son's simple tastes. Her parents were wealthy academics who clearly approved of Thomas's medical career. I couldn't help but notice how they spoke about my construction business with barely concealed condescension, despite the fact it had paid for their daughter's extravagant wedding. Just 6 months after the wedding, Jennifer was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. The next 2 years became a blur of hospitals, treatments, hope, and disappointment. Thomas was supportive initially, coming by to explain treatment options and speak with her doctors. But as Jennifer's condition worsened, his visits became less frequent. Amanda always had an excuse why they couldn't stay long. Jennifer fought hard, but the cancer was relentless. She passed away on a quiet spring morning, with her hand in mine. At the funeral, Thomas stood beside me, but there was an emotional distance between us that hadn't been there before. Amanda spent most of the service checking her phone. The years following Jennifer's death were the loneliest of my life. I threw myself into my work until my health forced me to retire at 65. I sold my company to my most trusted employees, ensuring they would maintain the legacy Jennifer and I had built. The sale, along with my other investments, left me financially secure for the rest of my life. My house, now worth $3.8 million in the booming real estate market, became both my comfort and my prison of memories. I kept busy maintaining the property, tending to the garden Jennifer had loved, and trying to stay connected with Thomas, though our relationship had become increasingly strained. Looking back, I can see the warning signs that I missed. The way Thomas and Amanda began to show unusual interest in my finances after I sold the company. The subtle comments about my age and health, the offers to help manage my affairs. But in my grief and loneliness, I was just grateful for their attention. I had no idea what they were really planning. The first clear sign that something was wrong came about 2 years after Jennifer's death. Thomas and Amanda invited me to dinner at their house, an impressive 5-bedroom colonial in an exclusive neighborhood. Their home was showcased with expensive furniture, artwork that looked straight out of a gallery, and a wine collection that would impress any connoisseur. Over dinner, Thomas mentioned that a medical colleague had told him about an investment opportunity, something about a biotech startup developing new cancer treatments. The connection to Jennifer's illness seemed calculated to tug at my heartstrings. The initial investment is $300,000, Thomas explained, swirling his third glass of wine. It could easily triple in value within 2 years. When I asked about the details, neither Thomas nor Amanda could provide specific information. No prospectus, no company name, just vague promises of remarkable returns. "We're putting in $100,000 ourselves," Amanda added quickly. "But we thought you might want to get in on the ground floor with us. Family investing together." The request made me uncomfortable. Throughout my career, I had been cautious with investments, preferring real estate and conservative funds. Speculative startups had never been my style. Still, I wanted to support my son, to maintain our increasingly fragile connection. "Let me see the paperwork first," I said reasonably. "If everything looks good, I might consider it." Thomas and Amanda exchanged a glance I couldn't quite interpret. "Of course, Dad," Thomas said, though he never produced any documents. 2 weeks later, Thomas called again. The opportunity was moving quickly, he said. They needed the money right away or would lose their place in the investment round. Against my better judgment, I transferred $300,000 to the account number Amanda provided. For 3 months afterward, whenever I asked about the investment, They changed the subject or provided vague assurances that everything was progressing well. Then the excuses started. The FDA approval was taking longer than expected. The research had hit a snag. The company needed more capital. 6 months after my investment, I finally demanded documentation. Thomas arrived at my house alone, unusually subdued. "Dad, I'm really sorry," he began, not quite meeting my eyes. "The company, it didn't work out. The technology wasn't viable." "You mean I've lost my money?" I asked, my stomach sinking. "We lost ours too," he said quickly. "These things are always risky." I later discovered through a casual conversation with one of Thomas's colleagues that there had never been any biotech investment. The colleague had no idea what I was talking about when I mentioned it. Around this same time, Thomas and Amanda began commenting on my memory during their increasingly frequent visits. "Dad, we talked about this last week. Don't you remember?" Thomas would say about conversations I was certain had never happened. Or Amanda would rearrange items in my kitchen, then act concerned when I couldn't find them. "Fred, are you having trouble keeping track of your things?" she would ask, her voice dripping with artificial concern. That can be a sign of cognitive issues, you know. At first, I doubted myself. Grief can affect memory, and I wasn't getting any younger. But then I started taking notes after every visit and phone call, documenting exactly what was discussed. When they tried to remind me of conversations that never occurred, I could check my notes. One evening, I pretended to go to bed early while Thomas and Amanda stayed downstairs. From the hallway, I overheard them discussing my finances. "The house alone is worth nearly $4 million, Amanda was saying. "And with his investments, we're looking at another $2 million at least." "He's still sharp most of the time," Thomas replied, his voice lower. "It's going to be harder than we thought. Everyone his age has some cognitive decline," Amanda insisted. "We just need to document the episodes. Your hospital connection can help with that." I retreated to my bedroom, shaken to my core. My own son was plotting against me. The next day, I called my banker and changed all my account passwords. I also made an appointment with a neurologist, not affiliated with my son's hospital. After a thorough examination and cognitive testing, the neurologist confirmed what I already knew. "Mr. Reynolds, your cognitive function is excellent for a man of any age," she told me. "There's no sign of dementia or significant memory issues." I asked her to document her findings in detail and kept a copy for myself. Meanwhile, the incidents with Thomas and Amanda escalated. They would show up unannounced, often when I was in the middle of something, then express concern that I seemed confused or overwhelmed. They began insisting on attending my regular doctor appointments, speaking to my physician as if I wasn't in the room. "He's been so forgetful lately," Thomas told my longtime doctor, while I sat right there. "Just the other day, he left the stove on and nearly started a fire. It was a complete fabrication. I hadn't even cooked that day." When I contradicted him, Thomas gave me a patronizing smile. "See what I mean? He doesn't remember." The final straw came when I discovered Thomas had been accessing my financial statements. I found copies of my investment portfolio in his briefcase when he left it unattended during a visit. When I confronted him, his expression shifted from shock to righteous indignation in an instant. "I'm trying to help you, Dad," he shouted. "Someone needs to make sure you're not being taken advantage of." "The only one taking advantage of me is you," I replied coldly. "I want my $300,000 back." His face darkened. "That money is gone. It was an investment that didn't pan out. That's life." "There was no investment, was there, Thomas?" I asked quietly. For a moment, he looked like the little boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Then his expression hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you should get your memory checked." He left in anger that day, and for 2 weeks, neither he nor Amanda contacted me. I used that time to quietly consult with a lawyer about protecting my assets. The meeting confirmed my worst fears. Thomas and Amanda were likely building a case to have me declared incompetent so they could control my finances. When Thomas finally called again, his voice was artificially cheerful, as if our confrontation had never happened. "Dad, we'd like to take you to dinner this Friday. There's something important we want to discuss with you." I agreed, knowing exactly what was coming. The game was about to change. but not in the way my son and his wife expected. The restaurant Thomas chose for our dinner was upscale, the kind of place where private conversations could be had without being overheard. Amanda wore an expensive black dress adorned with jewelry I recognized as pieces I had given Jennifer. Thomas was in a tailored suit, looking every inch the successful doctor. I dressed simply in khakis and a button-down shirt, the same style I had worn my entire life. After ordering drinks, Thomas leaned forward, his expression serious. "Dad, Amanda and I have been talking. We're worried about you living alone in that big house." "I manage just fine," I replied evenly. Amanda placed her manicured hand over mine in what was meant to be a comforting gesture. It felt like a trap. "Fred, we've noticed some concerning patterns. The forgetfulness, the confusion. It's not safe for you to be on your own anymore. We think it's time for you to have some live-in help," Thomas continued. "Or better yet, move into a senior community where you can have appropriate care." "And what would happen to my house in this scenario?" I asked, already knowing the answer. They exchanged a quick glance. "It makes financial sense to sell it," Amanda said smoothly. "The upkeep alone must be overwhelming for you. We could find you a lovely condo closer to us." Over the main course, they outlined their plan as if it were a generous offer, rather than a transparent attempt to liquidate my largest asset. They would handle the sale of my home, manage the proceeds for me, and find me a suitable place to live. All for my own good, of course. When I expressed reluctance, their tactics shifted. "Dad, you need to be practical," Thomas insisted. "Your cognitive health is declining. We're seeing it more every time we visit." "My neurologist disagrees," I countered. Thomas looked surprised, then dismissive. "You saw a neurologist? Without telling me? Who was it?" "One of those doctors who tell patients what they want to hear, I'm sure. Dr. Eleanor Patel at University Medical Center. You can look up her credentials." Thomas's jaw tightened. He knew Dr. Patel by reputation, a leading specialist who couldn't be easily dismissed. "One evaluation doesn't tell the whole story," Amanda interjected smoothly. "Cognitive decline happens gradually. We see it even if you don't." Over dessert, the conversation turned to estate planning. Amanda, leveraging her legal background, explained how much simpler everything would be if I signed a power of attorney now, while I was still able to make decisions. "It's really about protecting your assets, Fred," she explained condescendingly. "If you were to become incapacitated without proper planning, the courts would get involved. You wouldn't want that." I listened quietly, nodding occasionally as if considering their words. Inside, I was seething, but years of business negotiations had taught me the value of a poker face. The following week, they began dropping by unannounced almost daily. Each visit included an inspection of my home, with comments about clutter or maintenance issues that were largely imaginary. Thomas would open my refrigerator, checking expiration dates and frowning at perfectly good food. Amanda would go through my mail, offering to help with my bills. One afternoon, I returned from a walk to find Thomas and Amanda in my home office, rifling through my financial documents. They had let themselves in with the emergency key I had given Thomas years ago. "What are you doing?" I demanded from the doorway. They jumped like guilty teenagers. "Just organizing your papers, Dad," Thomas said quickly. Everything was in such disarray. The next violation was even more disturbing. Thomas scheduled a doctor's appointment for me without my knowledge or consent. He simply showed up one morning announcing, "Dad, we need to leave in 20 minutes for your appointment with Dr. Griffith." "I don't have an appointment today," I said, confused. "Yes, you do. I told you about it last week. This is exactly what concerns us, that you don't remember these conversations." Too startled to argue effectively, I found myself in the office of a geriatric specialist I had never met. Dr. Griffith addressed all his questions to Thomas, referring to me in the third person, even though I sat right there. When I tried to interject, Thomas would answer for me or correct my responses. "He's been getting more confused in the evenings," Thomas told the doctor. "Sundowning, I think it's called." "That's absolutely false," I objected. Dr. Griffith made a note without looking at me. "Agitation and denial are common symptoms," he murmured to Thomas. After the appointment, I requested my medical records. Among the notes was a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment with a recommendation for family supervision. Thomas had effectively created a paper trail questioning my competence. That evening, I received a call from my neighbor Harold, a retired judge who had become a good friend after Jennifer's passing. "Fred, I saw Thomas at the community center today," he said carefully. "He was talking to several neighbors about your condition, asking them to keep an eye on you and report any concerning behavior to him. He mentioned something about early-stage dementia." My blood ran cold. Thomas was systematically building a case against me, creating documentation and gathering potential witnesses. The plan was becoming clear. Have me declared incompetent, take control of my assets, and ship me off to some facility while they enjoyed the fruits of my lifetime of work. The next day, 2 more friends called with similar stories. Thomas and Amanda were spreading concerns about my mental health throughout my social circle. Some friends were skeptical, but others began treating me differently, speaking slower, watching me with worried expressions. I decided to test how far they would go. During their next visit, I deliberately left my checkbook on the kitchen counter with the latest statement showing a significant balance. Then I excused myself to take a shower, leaving my phone's camera running secretly in the living room. The footage confirmed my worst suspicions. The moment I was out of sight, they began examining my financial documents, taking photos with their phones, and speaking in low voices about account balances and property values. "We need to move faster," Amanda whispered urgently. "What if he changes his will?" "The will doesn't matter if we can show he's not competent," Thomas replied. "Everything would go into conservatorship, and as his only family, I'd be the obvious choice to manage it. But that takes time," she countered. "If we could get him to sign over the house now, I'd heard enough." My own son was actively conspiring to strip me of my autonomy and possessions. The little boy I had raised, put through medical school, and loved unconditionally, was now viewing me as nothing more than an obstacle between him and my money. That night, I called James Sullivan, an attorney I had worked with during my business years. "I need your help," I told him, "and I need absolute discretion." The next morning, when Thomas called to check in, I told him I had been thinking about our conversations. "Maybe you're right," I said, injecting a slight quaver into my voice. "This house is getting to be a lot to handle on my own." The eagerness in his response was painful to hear. My son wasn't even trying to hide his excitement at the prospect of getting his hands on my property. "That's great, Dad. Really sensible. Why don't Amanda and I come over tonight to discuss the next steps?" "Sure, son," I replied mildly. "Let's talk about my future." What Thomas didn't know was that I had already set my own plan in motion, one that would expose their scheme and protect what was rightfully mine. Thomas and Amanda arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, dressed impeccably as always. Amanda carried a leather portfolio filled with documents. Thomas brought an expensive bottle of scotch, clearly planning to celebrate what they thought would be their victory. I had prepared a simple dinner, acting the part of the declining old man they believed me to be. I slightly burned the roast, forgot to put out certain utensils, and shuffled more than necessary when moving around the kitchen. With each mistake, they exchanged knowing glances, their confidence growing. After dinner, we moved to the living room where I had lived so many moments with Jennifer. The room where we had celebrated Christmases, birthdays, and quiet evenings together. The room where she had told me she was sick, and where I had held her hand during her final days. Now it was the setting for my son's betrayal. "Dad," Thomas began, his doctor voice in full effect, calm and authoritative. "We've given this a lot of thought, and we believe the best solution is for you to sign over the house to us now." "Sign over my house?" I asked, feigning confusion. Amanda leaned forward, opening her portfolio. "It makes the most sense financially, Fred. We'd create a life estate, so you could continue living here until—" She paused delicately. "Until you need more care. Then we could sell it without the complications of probate." "I see," I said slowly. "And where would I go when I need more care?" "We've researched some excellent assisted living facilities," Thomas replied smoothly. "Very comfortable places with good reputations." "But this is my home," I protested, watching their reactions. "Your mother and I built it together." Thomas's expression hardened slightly. "Dad, be reasonable. You can't manage this place anymore. Just last week you forgot to lock the front door overnight." Another lie. "I had security cameras installed and checked the footage every morning." "We're trying to help you," Amanda added, her tone patronizing. This is about your safety and well-being. I looked around the room slowly, as if considering their proposal. And if I'm not ready to sign over my house, the moment of truth had arrived. Thomas and Amanda exchanged glances, silently deciding who would deliver the threat. Thomas apparently drew the short straw. Dad, if you're not willing to accept our help voluntarily, we may need to pursue other options. His voice was clinical now, as if addressing a difficult patient. We have documentation of your cognitive decline from multiple sources. We could petition the court for guardianship. There it was, the ultimatum. Hand over my home willingly, or they would try to have me declared incompetent and take it anyway. You'd do that, I asked quietly. You'd go to court to take control of my life. It wouldn't come to that if you cooperated. Amanda interjected sharply. This is the simplest solution for everyone. Thomas nodded in agreement. We're moving in tomorrow, Dad. Either you sign these papers now, or we'll file for emergency guardianship on grounds that you're a danger to yourself. I let my hands shake slightly as I reached for the documents Amanda was sliding across the coffee table. The same table where Thomas had done his homework as a child, where I had signed the check for his medical school tuition. Can I have some time to read these? I asked, sounding uncertain. They're standard legal documents, Amanda dismissed. Nothing complicated, just a transfer of the property deed and a power of attorney for your finances. Just to be safe, Thomas added with a tight smile. So we can help manage your affairs. I pretended to review the papers, turning pages slowly while they watched with barely concealed impatience. The documents were exactly what I expected. A complete transfer of my home and control of my assets to them, with nothing protecting my interests. What about my money? I asked, looking up. My savings and investments? We'll help manage those too, Thomas said quickly. You won't have to worry about anything. I set the papers down and looked my son directly in the eyes. And if I refuse, Thomas's facade of concern finally cracked. Then we'll do what we have to do. I'm sorry it's come to this, but you're not leaving us much choice. Amanda has already drafted the guardianship petition. One call to Dr. Griffith, and we'll have the medical documentation we need. We could file first thing tomorrow, Amanda added coldly. The court usually acts quickly in cases involving elderly individuals at risk. I looked at these two people, my son and his wife, as they delivered their ultimatum without a shred of remorse. In that moment, I barely recognized the child I had raised. The transformation was complete. Thomas was now a stranger, wearing my son's face. I see, I said quietly. It's for your own good, Dad, Thomas insisted, his voice softening as he sensed my apparent resignation. You'll understand eventually. I nodded slowly, as if processing this painful reality. Could I have one more night to think about it? To sleep in my home while it's still mine? They exchanged another glance, calculating the risks of giving me any time at all. The papers will need to be notarized anyway, Amanda conceded reluctantly. We can come back tomorrow with a notary. But don't get any ideas about changing the locks or calling a lawyer. That would just make things worse for you. They left shortly after, taking their unsigned documents with them. Thomas's parting words echoed in my ears as I closed the door behind them. We're moving in tomorrow, Dad. One way or another. It's time to accept that you need help. Alone in my house, surrounded by memories of happier times, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of my son's betrayal. My hands shook, not with fear or age, but with a rage I had rarely experienced in my life. How had I raised a child capable of such calculated cruelty? Where had I gone wrong? I moved through the silent rooms, touching photographs of our family when we were whole and happy. Jennifer smiling on our wedding day. Thomas graduating from medical school, my arm proudly around his shoulders. The three of us on the deck of this very house, laughing in the summer sunshine. In our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed I had once shared with Jennifer, and finally let the tears come. Not just for my current situation, but for all that had been lost. My beloved wife, the son I thought I knew, the future I had imagined, where Thomas might someday bring grandchildren to visit this home. I wish you were here, I whispered to Jennifer's memory. You'd know what to do. As the night deepened around me, my grief gradually transformed into resolve. I had built my business from nothing. I had constructed this house with my own hands. I had overcome poverty, hardship, and loss. I would not be bullied by my own child and his greedy wife. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. Thomas and Amanda wanted a war. They were about to discover they were woefully unprepared for the battle ahead. At 6:30 the next morning, I called James Sullivan, my attorney. Despite the early hour, he answered immediately. They made their move, I told him, just as we expected. Did you get it on tape? He asked. Every word, I confirmed. The small digital recorder I had hidden in the bookshelf had captured the entire conversation, including their explicit threats. Perfect. I'll file the restraining order this morning. Meet me at my office at 9 to review everything. My next call was to Dr. Eleanor Patel, the neurologist who had evaluated me. She listened gravely as I explained what had transpired. This is elder abuse, Mr. Reynolds, she said firmly. I've seen this pattern before, unfortunately. I'll prepare a comprehensive report affirming your cognitive competence. If this goes to court, I'll testify on your behalf. My third call was to Harold, my neighbor and retired judge. It's happening, I told him simply. I'll be right over, he replied without hesitation. As I waited for him, I gathered the evidence I had been collecting over the past months. Financial records showing the $300,000 investment that had disappeared. My medical reports confirming my mental competence. The video of Thomas and Amanda going through my financial documents without permission. The audio recording of last night's conversation. Harold arrived just as I finished organizing everything. He reviewed the material with the sharp eye of a man who had spent decades on the bench. This is textbook undue influence and financial exploitation, he said grimly. They've made serious mistakes here, Frederick. Legally actionable mistakes. I don't want to destroy my son, I said quietly. I just want to protect myself. Harold's expression softened. I understand. But Thomas needs to face consequences, or he'll try this again, perhaps with someone more vulnerable than you. He was right, of course. My son had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. While I still loved him, I could no longer trust him, and Amanda's influence had clearly poisoned whatever remained of his moral compass. At 9, I met with James at his downtown office. A distinguished man in his 60s, James had been my legal advisor during the sale of my company. He had also helped update my will after Jennifer's death. Now, he was my shield against my own son's schemes. The temporary restraining order has been filed, he informed me. Once it's granted, Thomas and Amanda will be legally prohibited from entering your property or contacting you directly. They'll be furious, I noted. James nodded grimly. Expect them to escalate. They may try to file for emergency guardianship in response. That's why we need to move quickly with our countermeasures. We spent the next 2 hours refining our strategy. First, James filed a formal complaint with the Medical Licensing Board regarding Thomas's abuse of his position to create false medical documentation. Second, he prepared a report for the Bar Association concerning Amanda's ethical violations in preparing legal documents under false pretenses. These won't necessarily result in severe professional consequences, James explained, but they'll create official records of their behavior and give them something to worry about besides harassing you. Next, we discussed the most crucial part of my plan, selling my house before Thomas and Amanda could gain control of it. I've already contacted Sarah Chen at Lakeview Realty, I told James. She's prepared to list the property immediately, and she believes we can find a buyer quickly in this market. James nodded approvingly. A smart move. Once the house is under contract with a bona fide purchaser, it becomes much more difficult for them to interfere. That afternoon, Sarah arrived to take photographs and prepare the listing. A sharp professional in her 40s, she had sold several of my construction company's properties over the years. Frederick, I'm so sorry about what you're going through, she said sincerely. I've already reached out to a few clients who I know are looking for exactly this kind of property. We should have multiple offers within days. True to her word, by the end of the week, we had 3 serious offers on the house. 2 were slightly below asking price, but the third, from a tech executive relocating from California, was for the full $3.5 million, all cash, with a quick closing timeline. It's a strong offer, Sarah advised. And with no financing contingencies, we could close in 2 weeks. I accepted immediately. The quicker this transaction happened, the better. Meanwhile, Thomas and Amanda had been served with the restraining order. As expected, they responded with fury. Thomas left a series of increasingly angry voicemails before the order was served, and afterward, they made their next move. They filed an emergency petition for guardianship, James informed me 3 days after the restraining order went into effect. They're claiming the restraining order itself is evidence of your paranoia and impaired judgment. Can they succeed? I asked, my stomach tightening. Unlikely, James assured me. We have substantial evidence countering their claims. Dr. Patel's evaluation is particularly powerful, given her reputation, but will need to appear at a hearing in 2 weeks. The house closing is scheduled for next Friday, I pointed out. That's before the hearing. James smiled slightly. Exactly. By the time we get to court, the house will already be sold. Their primary financial motivation will be gone. While these legal maneuvers were underway, I took additional steps to protect myself. I installed a comprehensive security system with cameras covering every approach to my home. I changed all my phone numbers and email addresses, sharing the new contact information only with trusted friends and advisors. I moved my remaining assets to new accounts at different financial institutions with enhanced security protocols. Most importantly, I reached out to people from Thomas's past who might have insights into his transformation. His college roommate, Michael, revealed that Thomas's ethical flexibility had begun during medical school, long before he met Amanda. He cheated on several exams, Michael confided reluctantly. I confronted him once, and he just laughed it off, said everyone did it. That wasn't the Thomas I thought I knew from undergrad. Thomas's first serious girlfriend, Jessica, had an even more disturbing story. He became controlling, always checking my phone, questioning where I'd been, she explained. When I ended things, he threatened to ruin my reputation. I actually had to transfer to a different university. These revelations were painful but illuminating. The seeds of Thomas's current behavior had been planted long ago. Amanda hadn't created the problem. She had simply nurtured traits that were already there. The day before the house closing, I walked through each room, saying goodbye to the home Jennifer and I had loved. I took photos of special features we had designed together: the hand-carved banister, the stone fireplace, the bay window where she used to read. These memories couldn't be taken from me, even if the physical structure would soon belong to someone else. I had already purchased a comfortable 3-bedroom ranch-style home in a nearby town, using a portion of my savings. It was much smaller than my current house, but perfect for my actual needs. I had begun quietly moving my personal possessions there, ensuring that nothing of sentimental value would be left behind. The most difficult task was deciding what to do about Thomas's childhood mementos. In the end, I packed them carefully in boxes and stored them at my new home. Despite everything, he was still my son. Perhaps someday, he would remember who he once was. With the closing set for 10 o'clock the next morning, I spent my final night in the house Jennifer and I had built together. I sat on our deck, watching the sunset over the lake, and felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. This house contained so many memories, but it had also become the focus of an ugly battle. Perhaps it was time to create new memories elsewhere. As I prepared for bed, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Dad, please don't do this." Thomas's voice was ragged, desperate. He had obviously found a way around the restraining order by using someone else's phone. "How did you know about the sale?" I asked calmly. "It doesn't matter. Just stop it. We can work something out." For a moment, I almost felt pity for him. "It's too late, Thomas. The closing is tomorrow." "You can't sell it," he shouted, his composed facade finally crumbling completely. "That's our house, our inheritance." "No, son," I replied softly. "It was my house, the one I built with your mother. It was never yours to take." I ended the call and blocked the number. Tomorrow would bring the culmination of my plan, and I needed to be rested and clear-headed. Whatever happened next, I was prepared. The morning of the closing dawned bright and clear. I was up early, making one final check of the house to ensure I hadn't forgotten anything important. At 8:15, Harold arrived to drive me to the title company where the closing would take place. As a precaution, James had arranged for a security guard to accompany us. "Are you ready for this?" Harold asked as we pulled out of my driveway. "More than ready," I replied, watching my home recede in the side mirror. We were about halfway to the title company when Harold's phone rang. He answered through his car's speaker system. "Judge Wilson," he said formally. "Harold, it's James. We have a situation. Thomas and Amanda just showed up at the title company with their attorney. They're demanding to speak with Frederick and threatening to disrupt the closing." Harold glanced at me, eyebrows raised. I nodded firmly. "We're continuing as planned," I told him. "We'll be there in 10 minutes, Harold informed James. "Have security ready." When we arrived, James was waiting in the parking lot. "They're inside, making quite a scene," he reported grimly. "The buyers are getting nervous." "Let's not keep them waiting then," I said, straightening my tie. I had dressed formally for the occasion, wearing my best suit, the one I had worn to sell my company. I wanted to present the image of a competent, dignified businessman, not a confused old man. As we entered the title company's conference room, I immediately saw Thomas and Amanda standing near the head of the table, with a thin, nervous-looking man I assumed was their attorney. On the other side sat a middle-aged couple I recognized from photos as the buyers, along with their agent and the title officer. "Dad," Thomas exclaimed when he saw me. "Thank God you're here. These people are trying to steal your house." The absurdity of his statement might have been comical under different circumstances. "Mr. Reynolds," the title officer began uncertainly, "your son is claiming you're not competent to execute this sale. We can't proceed until this is resolved." James stepped forward. "My client has been evaluated by Dr. Eleanor Patel, Chief of Neurology at University Medical Center, and found to be fully competent." He placed Dr. Patel's report on the table. "Furthermore, Mr. Reynolds has a restraining order prohibiting Thomas and Amanda Reynolds from contacting him." He produced that document as well. Thomas's attorney shuffled uncomfortably. "We've filed an emergency petition for guardianship that contests these findings, which hasn't been granted," James countered smoothly. "Until a court rules otherwise, Mr. Reynolds retains full legal control of his property and affairs." I moved to the table and placed down my own document, a formal notification that I had signed the day before. "This is a police report documenting financial elder abuse perpetrated by Thomas and Amanda Reynolds, including their attempt to coerce me into signing over my home through threats and intimidation." The room fell silent. The buyers exchanged worried glances. Their agent leaned over and whispered something, presumably advising them about their options. Thomas's face had gone pale. Amanda, however, stepped forward aggressively. "This is ridiculous. We've been trying to help Fred because he's declining mentally. He's paranoid and confused. Just look at what he's doing, selling his beautiful home to move into some tiny place. It makes no sense." I remained calm as all eyes turned to me. "I built this house with my late wife 30 years ago. I've cherished it as our home. But now, at 67, I don't need 5,000 square feet and the associated maintenance. I've purchased a lovely ranch-style home that better suits my current lifestyle. That's not confusion. It's practical decision-making." The title officer, a woman in her 50s who had probably seen her share of family disputes, studied me carefully. "Mr. Reynolds, setting aside the legal issues for a moment, are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with this sale today?" "I am," I confirmed firmly. She nodded and turned to the buyers. "Mr. and Mrs. Delaney, given the situation, I should inform you that this sale could potentially be contested after the fact. Do you still wish to proceed?" The male buyer, a confident-looking man in his 40s, nodded. "Our attorney has reviewed the competency evaluation and the restraining order. We're satisfied that Mr. Reynolds is acting of his own free will." Thomas stepped forward, his doctor persona back in place. "Dad, please, don't do this. We can work something out that's good for everyone." For the first time, I addressed my son directly. "Like your ultimatum the other night? Sign over my house or you declare me incompetent? That kind of working something out?" He flinched visibly. "You're taking that out of context." Am I? I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a small recorder. Should I play the recording of our conversation for everyone here? Thomas's attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm. I advise against further discussion, he murmured, loudly enough for all to hear. Amanda, however, was not so easily silenced. You ungrateful old man, she hissed, her composed facade cracking completely. After everything Thomas has done for you, after all our help and concern, I repeated incredulously. Is that what you call trying to steal my home and lock me away? Is that what you call taking $300,000 of my money for a non-existent investment? Her eyes widened at the mention of the money. Clearly, she hadn't expected me to bring that up in front of witnesses. We're leaving, Thomas's attorney announced abruptly, gathering his papers. My clients reserve all rights to contest this sale. Contest all you want, James replied confidently. The evidence speaks for itself. As they moved toward the door, I called out, Thomas. My son stopped, turning slowly to face me. I want you to see something. I placed the sale contract on the table, the final page facing up where my signature appeared next to the final price, $3.2 million. You threatened to move in tomorrow, I said quietly, but there won't be a house for you to move into. It doesn't belong to me anymore. For a moment, I saw a flash of the little boy I had raised, vulnerable and uncertain. Then his expression hardened again. This isn't over, he said coldly. For the house, it is, I replied. But you're right. This isn't over between us. Not by a long shot. After they left, the closing proceeded smoothly. Papers were signed, funds were transferred, and keys were handed over. By noon, I was no longer the owner of the home I had built with Jennifer. The knowledge brought both sadness and relief. Outside in the parking lot, James shook my hand firmly. Congratulations, Frederick. Phase 1 complete. Thank you for everything, I told him sincerely. Don't thank me yet, he cautioned. They'll likely proceed with the guardianship hearing. Even without the house at stake, there are still your other assets to protect. I'm ready, I assured him. Whatever comes next, I'm ready. Harold drove me to my new home, where most of my personal belongings had already been moved. It was smaller, more manageable, but still comfortable and well-appointed. Most importantly, it was mine, free and clear, purchased through a living trust that would be much harder for Thomas to attack. As I unpacked a box of photographs in my new living room, my phone rang. It was Sarah Chen, my real estate agent. The money has been transferred to your account, she informed me. Congratulations on a successful closing. Thank you, Sarah. I couldn't have done it without you. There was a pause before she continued. Frederick, I thought you should know. Thomas and Amanda came by my office after the closing. They were upset. Thomas threatened to sue me for facilitating the sale. I told him that as your agent, I was legally obligated to represent your interests, not his. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, I said sincerely. Don't worry about me, she replied firmly. I've dealt with angry family members before, but you might want to be careful. They didn't seem ready to give up. After we hung up, I sat on my new porch, considering her warning. I had won this battle, but the war might not be over. Thomas and Amanda had been publicly humiliated and lost their chance at my most valuable asset. People like them rarely accepted such defeats gracefully. Sure enough, that evening, a car pulled into my new driveway. Thomas got out alone, looking disheveled and agitated. I watched through the security camera as he approached my front door and rang the bell repeatedly. Dad, I know you're in there, he shouted. We need to talk. I didn't respond. The restraining order was still in effect, and I had installed security cameras that were recording his violation. After several minutes of shouting and ringing, he returned to his car and pulled out his phone. Moments later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I didn't answer. Dad, please, his voicemail began, his voice breaking. Everything's falling apart. Amanda's talking about divorce. The hospital is asking questions about my conduct. I could lose my medical license. Please, I need your help. The desperation in his voice tugged at my heart despite everything. This was still my son, the little boy I had taught to ride a bike, the teenager I had comforted through his first heartbreak. the young man whose medical school graduation had filled me with immeasurable pride. But he was also the adult who had tried to steal my home, who had lied about my mental health, who had threatened to have me declared incompetent for his own gain. Trust, once broken, couldn't be instantly repaired. I sent a text message to the number. "I can't talk to you now. The restraining order is still in effect. If you're serious about making amends, have your attorney contact James Sullivan to arrange a mediated conversation." His reply came seconds later. "Please, Dad. I made a terrible mistake. Amanda pushed for this, but I went along with it. I was wrong. So wrong. I didn't respond further. Blaming Amanda might be partially justified, but it was also an easy way for Thomas to avoid full responsibility. Real reconciliation, if it was even possible, would require complete honesty and accountability. As night fell on my first day in my new home, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness for what had been lost, relief at having protected myself, uncertainty about what the future held for my relationship with my son. But beneath it all was a foundation of quiet strength. I had faced one of the most painful betrayals imaginable, and had not only survived but prevailed. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same resilience that had carried me through all of life's previous challenges. As Jennifer used to say, the measure of a life isn't in avoiding storms, but in how you dance in the rain. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, I had peace. In the 3 months following the sale of my house, my life settled into a new rhythm. My smaller home proved perfect for my needs, with everything on one level, and a manageable garden where I grew vegetables just as my father had taught me decades ago. I joined a local community center, made new friends, and even began teaching a woodworking class for beginners. The legal aftermath with Thomas and Amanda played out much as James had predicted. They proceeded with the guardianship hearing, but it was quickly dismissed when the judge reviewed Dr. Patel's evaluation and the evidence of their financial exploitation attempts. The judge was particularly troubled by the recording of their ultimatum and the documented pattern of behavior leading up to it. "Mr. Reynolds," she said during her ruling, "far from being incompetent, you have demonstrated remarkable clarity and sound judgment in protecting yourself from exploitation. This case is dismissed." Following the dismissal, Thomas and Amanda's marriage deteriorated rapidly. According to mutual acquaintances, they argued constantly, each blaming the other for their failed scheme and its consequences. 2 weeks after the hearing, Thomas moved out of their house. A month later, Amanda filed for divorce. The professional consequences were serious as well. While Thomas didn't lose his medical license, he was placed on probation by the Hospital Ethics Committee and required to complete additional training on elder care and patient autonomy. Amanda received a formal reprimand from the Bar Association for her ethical violations, a black mark that would follow her legal career indefinitely. Throughout this period, I maintained my distance, protected by the restraining order and my new living arrangements. Thomas made several attempts to contact me through intermediaries, sending letters of apology and requests to meet. I wasn't ready. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too profound. Instead, I focused on healing myself. Jennifer's death had left a void that I had never properly addressed, too busy maintaining the big house and our old life. Now, in my new circumstances, I finally confronted my grief fully. I joined a bereavement group where I met others who understood the particular pain of losing a spouse. Among them was Eleanor, a retired librarian whose husband had died of the same type of cancer that took Jennifer. "The hardest part isn't just losing them," Eleanor said during one meeting. "It's losing the person you were when you were with them." Her words resonated deeply. With Jennifer, I had been a protector, a provider, one half of a team navigating life together. Without her, I had to discover who I was on my own. 6 months after selling the house, I received a letter from Thomas that was different from his previous attempts at contact. There were no excuses, no mentions of Amanda's influence, just a simple, heartfelt acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. "I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way," he wrote. "I violated our relationship as father and son for financial gain. There's no justification for what I did. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I understand the gravity of my actions and am truly sorry for the pain I've caused you." He closed by informing me that he had entered therapy to understand his behavior and was making major changes in his life. He had sold the expensive house and car, simplified his lifestyle, and was volunteering at a clinic for underserved communities. He didn't ask to meet or for me to respond. He was simply sharing his journey. I shared the letter with Harold during one of our regular chess games. My neighbor had become one of my closest friends in this new chapter of life. "Do you think he's sincere?" Harold asked after reading it. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to believe he is." "You don't have to decide right away," Harold advised. "Time will tell if these changes are genuine." Over the next few months, I received occasional updates from Thomas through James. He had finalized his divorce from Amanda. He had completed his ethics probation at the hospital. He had continued his therapy and volunteer work. Each message was respectful of my boundaries, never asking for more than I was ready to give. Nearly a year after the confrontation at the title company, I finally agreed to meet Thomas at a neutral location, a coffee shop with James present as a mediator. Seeing my son walk through the door, I was struck by how much he had changed physically. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple, casual attire. He had lost weight, and there were new lines on his face, evidence of the difficult year he had experienced. "Dad," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion, "thank you for meeting me." We talked for nearly 2 hours, carefully at first, then with increasing openness. Thomas spoke candidly about how his values had gradually shifted during medical school and his early career, how the pressure to project success had driven him to make increasingly poor choices, and how Amanda had amplified his worst tendencies rather than created them. "I lost sight of who I wanted to be," he confessed. "The lessons you and Mom taught me about integrity, about putting people before profits, I abandoned them all. It took losing everything to make me remember." I listened more than I spoke, trying to reconcile this repentant man with the son who had threatened to have me declared incompetent. Was genuine change possible after such a profound breach of trust? I wasn't sure, but I was willing to find out. "I can't promise that things will ever be the same between us," I told him honestly. "Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild." "I understand," he nodded solemnly. "I'm not asking for things to go back to the way they were. I'm just asking for a chance to show you who I'm becoming." We agreed to move forward cautiously. Small, occasional meetings. No financial discussions. No promises that couldn't be kept. It was a beginning, tentative and fragile, but a beginning nonetheless. 2 years have passed since that first meeting. Thomas and I now have dinner together twice a month. He's returned to the values that Jennifer and I tried to instill in him, focusing his medical practice on serving those who truly need help rather than wealthy clients who can pay for unnecessary procedures. He lives simply now, in a modest apartment, and seems genuinely happier than when he was chasing status and wealth. As for me, I found unexpected joy in this new chapter of life. My smaller home has become a gathering place for new friends. I've traveled to places Jennifer and I always talked about visiting. I've even begun dating Eleanor from my bereavement group. Our shared experiences creating a foundation of understanding that's grown into deep affection. The $3.2 million from the house sale, along with my other savings, ensures my financial security. More importantly, I've learned to guard my heart while still keeping it open to new connections. I've discovered that family isn't just defined by blood, but by those who demonstrate love through their actions and respect for your boundaries. Thomas and I will never recapture the uncomplicated relationship we had when he was a child. Too much has happened, but we're building something new, based on honesty and hard-earned wisdom. He's learning that true success isn't measured by possessions or status, but by integrity and the positive impact you have on others' lives. As for me, I've learned that it's never too late to start over, that protecting yourself isn't selfish but necessary, that forgiveness is possible without forgetting, that the greatest freedom comes from letting go of what you thought your life would be and embracing what it can still become. Jennifer would be proud of how far I've come. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, I imagine telling her about my day, about the challenges overcome and the joy rediscovered. In those moments, I can almost hear her saying what she always did when life presented its hardest tests. This too shall pass, Fred, and something beautiful waits on the other side. She was right, as she so often was. Something beautiful did wait on the other side of that painful betrayal. Not what I expected or planned for, but something authentic and meaningful nonetheless. A life rebuilt on my own terms. If you've experienced betrayal or loss, know that it doesn't define you or determine your future. You can choose resilience. You can protect what's yours without hardening your heart. You can find the strength to start again, no matter your age or circumstances. Have you ever had to start over after betrayal or loss? How did you find the courage to move forward? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and renewal. And remember, sometimes the greatest act of strength is simply refusing to be defined by how others have treated you. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself and those you truly trust.